ADR. Promoting dialogue.
It's midday in Dakar, 1 p.m. in Lagos. Good afternoon and welcome to Newslink and West Africa Democracy Radio, 94.9 FM in Dakar, Senegal, online at wadr.org. Here are our top stories. Nigerian military seizes over 400 Starlink devices linked to terrorists in the northeast region.
I think so far within this sector we've arrested over 400 pieces of Starlink, and that has denied them the ability to be able to get connection easily.
Concerns grow over persistent governance challenges and declining public trust in Africa. Ghana government approves emergency evacuation of 300 citizens from South Africa following xenophobic attacks against foreign nationals.
We issue an advisory advising our Ghanaian brothers and sisters to avoid the confrontation as we continue to ensure that what the president has said, they are able to implement it.
And inmates at Lombe Civil Prison continue a hunger strike over continued detention despite court release order. Please stay tuned for details of these stories and more.
On the news, this is Sankulu Jibril Janko.
Thank you for joining our broadcast. The Newslink begins with concerns growing over persistent governance challenges facing African countries, including weak institutions, declining public trust, and limited financing for democratic reforms. In this context, governance experts, policymakers, and civil society actors met in Senegalese capital Dakar on Tuesday and addressed the need for strong philanthropic support and broader partnerships to help build more inclusive and accountable governance systems across the continent. The discussions form part of a forum organized by Trust Africa under its West Africa Democratic Fund initiative. Veronique Njai attended the discussions and now reports.
The discussions focused on reimagining governance systems that are more accountable, responsive, and capable of delivering sustainable development for African citizens. Dr. Ibrahim Assal is the director of Trust Africa.
It's a fund to support efforts to reimagine governance and democracy in West Africa, and to make sure that we have governance systems that are inclusive, rooted in our context, and that are based on an idea and a vision of the future that we want for this continent and for our region in particular.
Speakers also highlighted the importance of African-led philanthropy. Omotade Akin Oina is a philanthropist working on the project.
The USAID aid is broken. There's no more resourcing. The philanthropies are not putting their money forward for us as they should. We keep saying Africa is not a poor continent. How are we developing, first, the understanding, second, the knowledge, third, the courage and confidence to negotiate differently?
The discussions examined the governance challenges facing the continent, including weak institutions, political instability, and declining public trust. Grace Jerry, Executive Director for Inclusive Friends based in Nigeria.
For me, reimagining governance, reimagining democracy is prioritizing the inclusion of the most marginalized community. They should be guided in a way that whatever message they're putting out there comes from them. They design the process themselves to change the order.
Stakeholders say improving governance structures and expanding support for locally driven solutions remain essential to addressing many of Africa's political and development challenges.
A report filed by Veronique Njai. The Nigerian military says its troops fighting insurgency in the northeast have intercepted more than 400 Starlink communication devices allegedly used by Boko Haram and ISWAP fighters. According to the military, the seizures are part of intensified operations targeting terrorist logistics, communications systems, and supply networks across the region. Let's join Usman Oman for more of this development.
The commander of Sector 2, Operation Hadinkai, Brigadier General Beidi Martins, says troops have intensified intelligence-driven operations aimed at crippling terrorist logistics and communication structures in the northeast. Briefing defense correspondents, the commander disclosed that more than 400 Starlink terminals linked to satellite internet services were intercepted during operations across Sambisa Forest, the Timbuktu Triangle, and other insurgent hideouts.
The terrorists use the Starlink satellite network, and I think so far within this sector we've arrested over 400 pieces of Starlink network, and that has helped to deny them the ability to be able to get connection easily. Apart from so many other logistics items and equipment that were intercepted.
The commander says troops have also infiltrated transport and logistic networks used by the insurgents through intelligence operations targeting traders, transporters and supply syndicates operating within the region. He adds that hundreds of logistics suppliers and collaborators linked to terrorist resupply operations have been arrested, while several consignments of petrol, medicines and motorcycle spare parts were intercepted along major movement corridors into Sambisa Forest and surrounding areas. General Martin further reveals that insurgents have been exploiting livestock markets to sell rustled animals and generate operational funds to counter the financing network. Security forces and local market authorities have introduced livestock verification measures requiring proof of ownership before animals can be sold. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Osman Umar reporting from Damaturu.
We now cross over to Ghana, where the government has authorized the emergency evacuation of 300 Ghanaian nationals from South Africa, following a fresh wave of xenophobic attacks targeting foreign nationals. Authorities say the affected citizens have already registered with Ghana's High Commission in Pretoria. The evacuation effort is in line with an early advisory issued by the Foreign Affairs Ministry. Our Accra correspondent Nadia Dictator reports.
Ghana's Foreign Affairs Minister Samuel Okudzeto-Ablakwa says President John Dramani Mahama has approved the immediate evacuation exercise to ensure the safety of affected citizens. According to the minister, the Ghanaians scheduled for evacuation had already responded to an earlier government advisory and formally registered with Ghana's High Commission in Pretoria for assistance. In a social media post on Tuesday, Mr. Ablakwa reaffirmed the government's commitment to protecting the welfare and security of Ghanaians wherever they may be. The latest development follows renewed fears over xenophobic attacks in South Africa, where foreign nationals from several African countries have periodically faced violence, intimidation, and displacement. Meanwhile, Ghana's High Commissioner to South Africa, Benjamin Kwashi, has issued an advisory to citizens in that country to restrict their movement ahead of a major protest by South Africans on Wednesday.
There is going to be another demonstration in Durban, which has just been announced, and they say that it will be the mother of all mother demonstrations. So we issue an advisory advising our Ghanaian brothers and sisters to also not go open their shop, to avoid the confrontation as we continue to engage the South African authorities and to ensure that what the president has said, they are able to implement it.
Previous outbreaks of xenophobic unrest in the country have affected many Africans, including Ghanaians, with some forced to seek emergency support and evacuation from their home governments. For WADR, Nadidi Teti, Accra.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Elsewhere in Togo, several inmates at the Lomé civil prison are on a hunger strike. The prisoners arrested during anti-government protests in 2018 are opposing their continued detention, despite a court order issued months ago for their release. Human rights organizations are equally denouncing the inmates' conditions and calling on authorities to free them immediately. Imo Edet completes the story.
By beginning a hunger strike, 13 inmates at Lomé civil prison hope to be released. They were sentenced to 10 years in prison following their arrest in late 2018 during protests against the government. Last February, investigating chamber of the Lomé Court of Appeal ordered their provisional release under judicial supervision. 3 months later, they remain behind bars. The Association of Victims of Torture in Togo denounces the conditions of their detention and calls for their release. Acholi Kao is president of the organization.
It's worrying because these are people who were already weakened during their arrest, and several have become ill. Among them, there was one death recorded a few years ago. It's becoming alarming that these same people are forced to resort to a hunger strike to have the court decisions concerning them enforced. This detention today can only be described as arbitrary.
In 2023, the Togolese justice system and the ECOWAS Court of Justice had requested the release of these detainees. The Association of Victims of Torture in Togo has been denouncing prison overcrowding for several years and calling for the release of all so-called political prisoners. Actually, Kao again says,
The most alarming case is the Lomé Central Prison, built for 600 inmates, but currently housing 2,250. This represents overcrowding of more than 300%. What astonishes us is the government's indifference and insensitivity. They have remained silent on these concerns.
For several years, Togolese civil society organizations have been denouncing the restriction of civic space and arbitrary arrests and detentions.
Imo added a reporting. Now to Benin, where former member of parliament Sunuboke Somaila has been sentenced to 5 years in prison for allegedly advocating a coup d'etat. He was convicted over social media messages which authorities say were offensive and likely to disturb a public order. In addition to the prison time, the Court for the Repression of Economic Crimes and Terrorism ordered the former MP to pay a fine of 10 million CFA francs. Augustine Coley reports.
In its decision on Tuesday, the Court for the Repression of Economic Crimes and Terrorism found Sumon Bokeh Somaila guilty and handed down a prison sentence accompanied by a financial penalty. The Special Prosecutor's Office had requested a harsh sentence, arguing that the former elected official's publications constituted incitement to subversion and threatened state security. The former parliamentarian is on trial for allegedly condoning a coup d'etat and inciting rebellion through electronic communication. A day after the December 7, 2025 failed coup attempt in Benin, Somaila posted on WhatsApp stating, I quote, "It's a party." End of quote. Appearing before the special court, the former parliamentarian claimed that the message was intended for a private group of old friends who were planning a reunion. These arguments failed to convince the court, which upheld his conviction.
Augustine Coley with that report. Back here in Senegal, stakeholders in debt crisis management are opposing the government's plans to seek a financial bailout package from the International Monetary Fund (IMF). The bailout aims to support the country's budgetary needs. However, economic experts and civil society actors are urging authorities to prioritize physical discipline, domestic structural reforms, and strategic investments. The concerns were raised on Tuesday in Dakar at the commencement of a two-day international conference on Senegal's debt crisis and alternatives to IMF-backed austerity measures. Christopher Atichu attended the ceremony and filed this report.
The two-day international conference held under the auspices of Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko comes at a time when Senegal's debt crisis has surged to nearly 132% of gross domestic product GDP. The crisis, largely linked to undisclosed debt accumulated between 2019 and 2024, is estimated at more than $70 billion. The situation has also placed increasing pressure on the economy, affecting government spending and the execution of key development projects. Debt management experts are urging the government to explore domestic alternatives instead. Executive Director of the International Development Economics Associate IDS, Charles Abugri, identifies the seven of debt in foreign currencies as one of the country's major economic vulnerabilities.
Sustainable solution for financing development must be one that reduces the approach by government to be borrowing in foreign currency.
Meanwhile, Head of Research and Policy for Africa, Ndongo Sambasela, calls for greater citizens' participation in governance and economic decision-making to help prevent further debt crisis.
Senegalese officials are responsible to some extent. All of these have to be, investigated formally, and the citizens should be, involved, because we should not accept that, the people suffer from the, bad governance.
Additionally, American economist and public policy analyst Jeffrey Sachs urged African countries to strengthen regional trade and economic cooperation as a way of reducing dependency on external borrowing.
Must trade as well with the rest of Africa. And Senegal, as a great port, also must connect through infrastructure.
Following the suspension of Senegal's $1.8 billion IMF credit program in 2024, authorities are expected to consider a range of policy options at the conclusion of the conference.
Christopher Atichu filed that report. You're listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM in Dakar, Senegal, online at wadr.org. Here is a reminder of our top stories. Nigerian military seizes over 400 Starlink devices linked to terrorists in the northeast region. Concerns grow over persistent governance challenges and declining public trust in Africa. Ghanaian government approves emergency evacuation of 300 citizens from South Africa following xenophobic attacks against foreign nationals. Elsewhere, inmates at Lome Civil Prison begin a hunger strike over continued detention despite court release order. Still ahead in the news, we have guest interview and sports news. Please stay with us.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Now to parliamentary issues. Burkina Faso's Transitional Legislative Assembly has unanimously approved 4 new bills aimed at strengthening cooperation within the Confederation of Sahel States, also known as AES. The measures were adopted Tuesday by all 59 deputies present and focus on diplomacy, development, defense and security, as well as the organization of joint parliamentary sessions between Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger. The protocols were originally signed in Bamako on May 23, 2025 and were presented to lawmakers by the Committee on Foreign Affairs, Defense and Security at the request of the Foreign Affairs Ministry. Details by Atiwin Bella.
Burkina Faso says the new legal framework will reinforce the 3 main pillars of the AES Confederation, including security, diplomacy and development, while improving coordination among member states. Foreign Minister Karamoko Jean-Marie Traoré told parliamentarians the ratification would help advance several projects already underway. These are the creation of a unified AES military force, a confederation bank, and joint television and radio services. He also said the alliance is working toward adopting common diplomatic positions on major international issues. During parliamentary debates, lawmakers discussed the financing of counter-terrorism efforts, the role of traditional conflict resolution mechanisms, and progress made since the AES Confederation was created in 2024. As a reminder, the Confederation of Sahel States was established by Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger to boost political, economic and security integration among the 3 military-led governments.
A report voiced by Atiwin Mbela. In Liberia, lawmakers are deliberating on several issues, including the welfare of voluntary workers, constitutional compliance and security. The discussions commenced on Tuesday following the resumption of the Parliament's second quarter sitting. The sitting also comes at a time when Liberians are demanding stronger legislative oversight of the country's mining sector, public payroll systems, and delivery of basic social services. WDR's Monrovia correspondent Abraham Parker reports.
The lawmakers returned to session, reopened debate on unresolved national matters discussed during previous sittings, including payroll placement for voluntary workers, concession monitoring involving beer mountain and Western cluster, and concerns surrounding the undocumented migration in border counties. Senator Pro Tempore Nyombli Kanga Lawrence outlined the key priorities for the second quarter of the third session of the 55th legislature. The pro tempore assured Liberians that the concerns of volunteer teachers and health workers would remain high on the Senate's agenda during the quarter.
It has been confirmed that work permits are still being granted to foreigners occupying positions that Liberians are capable of serving in. The Secretary of the Senate should do a communication requesting the list of volunteer teachers per county and those who are placed on payroll.
Meanwhile, one of the major national security concerns highlighted on the Senate floor was the reported influx of Burkinabes into Grand-Jida County. During deliberations, Grand-Jida County Senator Thomas Yaya Nimlin disclosed that more than 60,000 Burkinabes have reportedly entered the county.
There is a conflict in my county. My citizens in some of the communities are fighting over land, and there's a lot of bloodshed. And stop giving land to Burkinabes. They are taking a huge amount of land. 68,000 Burkinabes in the county.
The development comes as several West African countries continue to experience population displacement linked to insecurity. For Newslink on WADR, Abraham Parker, Monrovia.
Meanwhile, experts and researchers, including dairy sector stakeholders from several countries, are meeting in Sali, Senegal for the 5th edition of international meetings on milk as driver of development. The forum, which opened on Tuesday, focuses on strengthening coordination on milk and dairy production while addressing key challenges facing the sector across Africa. The initiative is led by the Senegalese Institute for Agricultural Research and the Center for International Cooperation in Agricultural Research for Development, among other partners. Abdullah Hassan gives the details in this report.
At the various exhibition stands are dairy sector stakeholders from several West African countries. They are showcasing locally produced milk and other dairy products. Zinabu Seidu came from Benin and works in dairy processing.
Milk is naturally a driver of development. It really helps women earn an income and engage in economic activity. We benefit from it because by processing and selling it, we earn some money to help meet household expenses.
Despite the hope the sector offers to stakeholders, it still faces several challenges. Abdoulaye Dieng is the representative of the Senegalese Minister of Agriculture, Food Sovereignty and Livestock.
Our dairy sectors still face challenges linked to sectorial production, animal feed, livestock health, market access, milk safety standards, collection and processing infrastructure, as well as competition from imported products. Our ambition is clear: to gradually reverse this trend through coherent policies and better organization of the value chain. The potential is there.
More broadly, across the West African sub-region, the Economic Community of West African States has already developed a policy aimed at boosting the dairy sector. The organization is calling on member states to invest more in the industry. Dr. Biu Gurasule is the coordinator of the West Africa Milk Offensive Support Project developed by the ECOWAS Commission.
For regional organizations, words alone are not enough. Investments are needed so that in every product that comes out can feel the contribution of a West African livestock farmer, a West African researcher, an investor, or a West African bank. If we succeed in raising awareness among all these stakeholders, we will significantly improve investment in the sector.
The 5th edition of the international meetings on milk as a driver of development continues until Thursday. Recommendations are expected to help strengthen the dairy sector across the sub-region.
Abdullah Hassan filed that report.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
The guest interview this afternoon focuses on the ongoing two-day international conference in Dakar. Stakeholders are proposing measures to domestically manage Senegal's debt crisis rather than seeking a financially bailout from the International Monetary Fund, IMF. Our guest is Charles Abougre, the Executive Director of the International Development Economics Associates Ideas. According to him, servicing Senegal's debt in foreign currency exposes the country to major economic vulnerabilities.
If they default on their debt, what is likely to be the impact? But if they don't default on their debt and continue to use all of the savings to pay the debt, so what is the balance of impacts in these two ways? Default, not default. If you default, there is a cost, a consequence. One consequence is that the government may not be able to go back to Eurobond market. But if that is the case, is that necessarily a bad thing? Countries do not have sufficient foreign exchange. It may actually be a good thing to save the revenue that comes from buying foreign exchange to reinvest it in economic growth. A country at the stage of development as Senegal should not be paying debts. They should be putting all that money into growing the economy and industrializing the economy. If the government of Senegal chooses to approach its debt problem by defaulting, by not agreeing as to the IMF, and by taking an alternative path, analyze the situation and learn some more, propose alternative solutions that address the short term as well as the long term and build international solidarity in support of the government of Senegal.
If Senegal should adhere to seeking a bailout from the IMF, what do you think would be the economic impact on the general public?
So there are two potential impacts. If you default, you save money. You put that money in development and the economy grows. So defaulting is not necessarily bad. So in the case of Ghana, it defaulted, but it took a long time before it started paying. And what happened when it went into the IMF agreement? They had to go into serious austerity. The government could not finance Agenda 111, healthcare. Government could not invest in infrastructure. So Ghana basically stagnated for 3 years. That is 3 years of lost development. If they had put that money into infrastructure rather than austerity, if they had put the money in health and education, Ghana would have grown faster.
Senegal's death was massively blown out of proportion as a result of the discovery of a hidden debt. From your point of view, how should citizens and civil society be concerned about issues of hidden debts?
So the only way to stop governments hiding debt is to do a law that forces government to publish every loan that they contract. And that when they publish it, so in the public domain. So at the moment, the government of Senegal needs to create a commission to audit it. So everybody knows what is it that was hidden legitimately, like it is in the public companies which was not declared, and what was hidden illegitimately, which is corruptly. But then the next step is to have a law that requires every debt that is contracted to be published.
Charles Abourgué is the Executive Director of the International Development Economics Associates. Well, in sports, we begin with athletics because the 2026 African Athletics Championship got underway on Tuesday with exciting lineup of tracks and field events, including the men's 100 and 400 meter races. Host nation Ghana is being represented by about 17 athletes, led by the country's fastest man Abdel Rashid Saminu, alongside Joseph Paul Amoa and Edwin Gadai in the men's 100 meters. In football, the Nigeria Football Federation says President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has approved Nigeria's hosting of the 2026 CAF Awards and the CAF Ordinary General Assembly scheduled for October. The announcement followed a meeting in Nairobi between Tinubu and Patrice Motsepe during the Africa Forward Summit. The CAF General Assembly brings together football leaders and officials from across the continent's 54 member associations. And the 2026 Under-17 Africa Cup of Nations begins this Wednesday in Morocco, with 16 teams battling for the continental glory and qualification to the FIFA Under-17 World Cup in Qatar. Defending champions Morocco opened their campaign against Tunisia, while Egypt faced Ethiopia. In Group B, Cote d'Ivoire take on Cameroon before Uganda meet debutants DR Congo. The top 8 teams will qualify automatically for the expanded FIFA Under-17 World Cup. We've come to the end of this edition of Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio Broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for joining us, and many thanks to Ismaila Kamara and Maudoju for the technical assistance. Do interact with us via our social media platforms, X, Instagram, and Facebook at WADR English. I am Sankule Jibril Janko. Good afternoon.
We thank you for listening to Newslink in Nigeria.